"This is an official inspection, Mr. Thorne." She shrieked, her voice a high-pitched, frantic whistle that cut through the still afternoon air. She was standing at my front gate, a furious crimson that clashed violently with her pristine white tennis outfit. Her SUV was idling in the dirt, a half-dozen bewildered-looking neighbors were gathered behind her, a sea of confused faces as she jabbed a finger at the rusty steel wire fence that marked my property line. "You're in violation of no less than 5 separate bylaws. The fines are accumulating. I demand you let me on this property to conduct a full assessment." My heart was pounding, a wild, frantic drum against my ribs, but my hands were steady. I looked past her to the crowd, then back at her, a slow, determined smile spreading across my face. "Ma'am," I said, my voice low and calm, "this is a private ranch. You're trespassing, and you need to leave now." And that's when everything went wrong. Before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment. What would you do if this happened to you? And subscribe to HOA Files. My name is Marcus Thorne, and my story, like so many of these HOA nightmares, started with a dream. Not a grand, extravagant dream, but a quiet, peaceful one. My grandfather, a man of simple pleasures and a fierce love for the land, had owned a sprawling 50-acre plot of prime real estate on the outskirts of the city. He never developed it. He just lived on a small, 5-acre section of it, in a rustic, hand-built cabin, and left the rest to grow wild. He had a vision, a dream that one day his land would become a place of peace. A sanctuary for people who wanted to escape the chaos of the world. But he was getting old, and his health was failing. He decided to sell off a small section of the land, a 20-acre plot, to a developer. The developer built a small, exclusive community of 100 houses, and named it Whispering Creek. They were a beautiful, picturesque community of McMansions, with manicured lawns and perfect identical-looking fences. They were also an hamed grandfather in his wisdom, never sold his cabin. He just let the new community grow up around him. He told me once that the HOA was a good thing. They kept the community clean, the rules in place. He was an easygoing man. He paid his dues, attended a meeting once every 2 years, and generally kept to himself. But as he got older, his health began to decline, and he couldn't keep up with the demands of the community. He stopped paying his dues, stopped attending meetings. In his yard, a wild, beautiful meadow of wildflowers and tall grass became a point of contention. The HOA, in their infinite wisdom, began to fine him. He never paid them. He just laughed and said, "They're a bunch of city folk. They don't know the difference between a weed and a wildflower." He was a man of simple pleasures. He didn't have time for this nonsense. When he passed, he left the cabin and the surrounding land to me. He also left me with a mountain of fines. I had no idea I was about to be dragged back into their world, and that my quiet, peaceful dream was about to become a living nightmare, my first interaction with the HOA. This time around came in the form of a certified letter. It was from the HOA president, a woman named Beverly. The subject line was, "Final notice. Outstanding dues and fines." The letter stated, in no uncertain terms, that I owed the HOA over $50,000 in unpaid dues and fines. My heart began to pound. I had a survey done when I inherited the property. The cabin and the surrounding 5 acres were not part of the HOA. They were on my deed. They were my property. I called her thinking it was a simple misunderstanding. "Hi, Beverly," I said, trying to keep my tone light and friendly. "I just got a letter about some fines. I think there's been a mistake. My property isn't in your HOA." "Oh, but it is," she said, her voice flat and condescending. "It's the lot number 3 on your deed. It's a requirement of the community. Everyone in the community is a member." "It's not," I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. "I have a copy of the original deed. My grandfather sold you the land, not the cabin. He never intended for his property to be part of the HOA," she laughed, a short, humorless little puff of air. "Oh, I think you're mistaken. We have a copy of the original deed. We know exactly what you own. And what you own is a plot of land within our community, a membership that has been in default for years." The feeling of violation was overwhelming. She wasn't just a petty neighbor. She was a genuine threat. I didn't have time for this nonsense. I had a cabin to restore and a life to live. I was so exhausted, so stressed, and so angry that I just turned around and walked away. I couldn't even look at her. But I knew this was just the beginning. The next day, a certified letter arrived. This wasn't an email, but a formal letter from the HOA, stamped with an official seal. The letter detailed a new set of bylaws, apparently passed in a unanimous community vote, that designated my land as community property, effective immediately. The letter also stated that my continued refusal to pay the fines would be considered a trespass on HOA property and would result in an injunction and a lien on my property. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just a petty squabble. This was a hostile takeover. I was so angry, so utterly hopeless that I couldn't even think straight. I paced my living room, the letter a crumpled ball in my hand. It seemed I was beaten. She had used her new position to change the rules, and I was the one who would pay for it. I felt a sense of isolation growing in me. It felt like it was me against everyone. I tried to talk to some of the old-timers I knew in the community. They all gave me the same response. Beverly is a tyrant. She just came in and took over. We're all afraid to speak up. My heart sank. I was on my own. I wasn't just fighting Beverly. I was fighting an entire system she had co-opted. A few weeks later, I drove up to my cabin, ready to spend the weekend on my peaceful retreat, and found a dozen cars parked on my road. People milling around, their faces expectant. Beverly was there, a clipboard in her hand, a triumphant smirk on her face. "What is this?" I asked, my voice low and dangerous. "We're having the annual HOA block party," she said. "Out. I'm just assigning duties. We thought it would be fun to have it on our new community land. You can help if you want." I stood there, speechless. The audacity, the sheer nerve of her. She was literally trying to turn my private land into a community party, with me as an unwilling participant. My peaceful sanctuary was about to be overrun by 100 strangers. I felt a surge of pure, blinding fury. I turned around, got back in my truck, and drove back down the hill. I was not going to let this happen. I was not going to give in. I spent the next few days holed up in my home, trying to figure out what to do. I had to expose her, but I didn't know how. I called an old friend who was a lawyer, explained the situation. He told me that my case was strong, but that getting an injunction to stop the block party would take time. Time I didn't have. The block party was in 2 days. I felt a sense of despair. She was going to win. She was going to prove that she could do whatever she wanted. And there was nothing I could do to stop her. Then I remembered something. Something I had completely forgotten. My grandfather's old filing cabinet. It was full of old documents, letters, legal papers. I had no idea what was in there, but I knew I had to find out. It was a long shot, but it was my only hope. I spent hours in his old study rummaging through dusty files filled with old tax returns, forgotten photo albums, and Christmas decorations. Just as I was about to give up, I found it. A thick manila envelope, yellowed and brittle with age, stamped on the front in faded ink, Whispering Creek HOA, Original Articles of Incorporation. I ripped it open, now my hands trembling. I flipped through the pages, my eyes scanning the fine print, the clauses, the rules. My heart was a drum in my chest. And there it was, in a small, nearly invisible clause. A part of the original charter that stated that my grandfather's land, listed any property on it, would be exempt from any and all HOA regulations. It also stated that the community and every person in it was a tenant on the land, and that the HOA was a legal entity that had the right to govern the land, but that the land itself was and would always be the property of my grandfather, and by extension me. My heart was a drum in my chest. She was a complete fraud. She hadn't just changed the rules. She had fundamentally misunderstood the entire legal structure of her community. She was a tenant, not an owner. She had been fining me, threatening me, and demanding access to my private property. And all along she had no right to do any of it. But she wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. A few days later, a certified letter arrived. This one was different. This wasn't from the HOA. It was from a law firm I didn't recognize. The letter stated that due to my continued non-compliance and the mounting unpaid fines, the HOA had exercised its right to place a lien on my property and was now initiating a foreclosure. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just harassment anymore. This was a move to take my home. I had no idea how she had pulled it off, but she had found a way to weaponize the HOA bylaws, turning them into a financial guillotine. I was so angry, so utterly hopeless, that I couldn't even think straight. I paced my living room, the letter a crumpled ball in my hand. It seemed I was beaten. I called my lawyer friend, explained the situation, and he was as shocked as I was. He said the case was ironclad. He said he'd get a court order to stop the foreclosure, but the block party was in 2 days. I couldn't just sit back and let her have her little party on my land. I had to make a statement. I had to expose her in front of everyone. I spent the next few hours meticulously documenting everything. I took pictures of the deed, highlighted the key clauses, and created a document detailing all of Beverly's fabricated rules and fines. I went to a local print shop and made hundreds of copies. The next morning, I woke up early. The air was crisp and cold, the lake still and glassy. It was the perfect day for a block party. I drove down to my front gate, a heavy-duty chain and a thick padlock in my hand. I walked up to the gate, and for the first time in my life, I locked it. I stood there, a quiet sentinel, waiting. I didn't have to wait long. At around 11 o'clock, the first cars started to arrive. A dozen of them. Then, a few more. And then, a bus. A big white tour bus, with Caterers of the Pines written on the side. My heart was pounding, a wild, frantic drum against my ribs, but my hands were steady. I saw Beverly drive up in her SUV, her face a mask of triumphant glee. She got out of her car, saw me standing by the gate, and her smile faltered. The hundreds of people gathered behind her, a sea of confused faces looked on. "What are you doing, Mark?" she shrieked, her voice high and shrill. "Unlock this gate right now. My guests are on the way." "Guests?" I asked, my voice low and calm. "I thought this was a community block party." She looked at the crowd and back at me, her face turning a furious crimson. She had lied to the community. This wasn't a community event at all. It was a private party she had planned, without anyone's permission, on a part of the land she had no right to claim as her own. "This is an official inspection, Mr. Thorne," she shrieked, her voice a high-pitched frantic whistle that cut through the still afternoon air. She was standing at my front gate, a furious crimson that clashed violently with her pristine white tennis outfit. Her SUV was idling in the dirt. A half-dozen bewildered-looking neighbors were gathered behind her, a sea of confused faces as she jabbed a finger at the rusty steel wire fence that marked my property line. "You're in violation of no less than 5 separate bylaws. The fines are accumulating. I demand you let me on this property to conduct a full assessment." My heart was pounding, a wild, frantic drum against my ribs, but my hands were steady. I looked past her to the crowd, then back at her, a slow, determined smile spreading across my face. "Ma'am," I said, my voice low and calm, "this is a private ranch. You're trespassing, and you need to leave now." And that's when everything went wrong. She wasn't just a liar. She was a fraud. 100 people were standing in the middle of a dirt road, waiting for a party that was never going to happen. I watched as the caterers, the band, and the photographer all began to pull up behind the crowd, their faces confused. I stepped forward, holding the old articles of incorporation in my hand. "Everyone," I said, my voice clear and strong, "I have something to show you. Beverly has been lying to you. This is not a community event. She has no right to use this land. Her new bylaws are a fraud. This entire thing is a scam." I began to read from the old documents. The clause about my grandfather's ownership, the clause about the HOA being a tenant on his land. As I spoke, the crowd erupted. People were talking, whispering, looking at Beverly with a new, suspicious gaze. She was cornered. She looked like a rat trapped in a cage. Her husband, a quiet, unassuming man, walked up to her, his face a mask of mortification, and began to whisper in her ear, She was exposed, defeated, and she had no one to blame but herself. The moral of the story is simple, and it's one I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. Never, ever assume you're beaten. And never underestimate the power of a man who just inherited a family cabin with a very old, very powerful deed. I have a long road ahead of me, a new battle to fight. The lawsuit to get her to pay for the fine she issued, the fight to have her removed from the HOA board for good. But for the first time in a long time, I'm not afraid. I'm ready. Because Beverly's petty tyranny was just the beginning. I've been a target before, and I'll be a target again. But next time, they won't even see me coming.